The courtroom was quiet, save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Maya Jackson sat at the defense table, her posture confident but relaxed. She had spent years preparing for moments like this, moments where she could stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Across the room, Officer Daniel Grayson sat stiffly, his jaw tight, and his eyes darting around as if searching for something to blame for his discomfort. He wasn't used to being questioned so thoroughly, especially not by someone like Maya. Maya's voice cut through the air, calm yet firm. "Officer Grayson," she began, glancing down at her notes before looking directly at him, "can you explain why your report states my client resisted arrest when bodycam footage clearly shows otherwise?" The question hung in the silence like a storm cloud. Grayson shifted in his seat, visibly irritated. His fingers drummed against the wooden railing beside him, betraying his growing unease. "Well," he started, his tone defensive, "sometimes what's on tape doesn't tell the whole story." Maya raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "So, you're saying the video evidence is unreliable?" "No, I'm saying people can misinterpret things," Grayson shot back, his voice rising slightly. The judge leaned forward, sensing the tension building between them. Spectators exchanged curious glances, whispering quietly among themselves. Something about this exchange felt different. It crackled with energy, as though everyone knew they were witnessing something significant. But Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed on, her questions sharp and deliberate. Each one peeled back another layer of Grayson's testimony, exposing cracks in his story. By the time she reached her final query, sweat glistened on Grayson's forehead. "And how do you justify using excessive force when my client posed no threat whatsoever?" she asked, her tone steady but piercing. Grayson snapped. Years of unchecked power, simmering resentment, and a deep-seated belief that he was untouchable boiled over in an instant. Without warning, he surged forward, shoving Maya hard enough to send her stumbling into the defense table. Papers scattered across the floor, and gasps erupted throughout the room. For a moment, everything froze. The judge's gavel hovered mid-air, jurors stared wide-eyed, and even the bailiff hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Maya steadied herself quickly, brushing off her suit jacket as though shaking off dust. Her heart pounded, but her expression remained composed. Slowly, she straightened up, meeting Grayson's furious glare with a look of quiet determination. "This isn't over," she said softly, almost under her breath, but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. It wasn't just a statement, it was a promise. As order was restored and Grayson was escorted out of the courtroom, whispers buzzed like electricity. Some admired Maya's composure, while others speculated about what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Grayson had made a grave mistake, and Maya, she was just getting started. After the courtroom erupted in chaos, Maya took a deep breath and collected herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the scattered papers from the floor, but her mind was already racing ahead. This wasn't just about her. It was bigger than that. What Grayson had done wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attack on justice itself, and Maya knew she couldn't let it slide. The first thing she did was file a formal complaint against Officer Grayson with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. It was a necessary step, but Maya understood that paperwork alone wouldn't be enough. She needed proof. Solid evidence that showed this wasn't an isolated incident. So she began digging deeper into Grayson's past. Late nights turned into early mornings as she sifted through old cases, news articles, and public records. Every thread she pulled seemed to unravel more of the truth. What Maya discovered shocked even her. Grayson had a long history of questionable behavior, especially when it came to interactions with people of color. There were multiple complaints filed against him over the years, some dismissed outright, others buried under layers of bureaucracy. Victims spoke of being intimidated, harassed, or worse, physically assaulted during arrests. Yet, somehow, Grayson always walked away unscathed. His badge acted like a shield, protecting him from accountability. Maya realized that taking down someone like Grayson wouldn't be easy. He wasn't just one bad apple. He was part of a system designed to protect its own. But Maya wasn't afraid of hard fights. She reached out to other attorneys, activists, and community leaders who shared her vision for change. Together, they formed a coalition dedicated to exposing not just Grayson, but the systemic issues that allowed officers like him to operate unchecked. One key ally was Marcus Hale, a retired detective who had once worked closely with Grayson. At first, Marcus was hesitant to speak out. He'd seen how whistleblowers were treated, ostracized, smeared, and sometimes ruined. But after meeting Maya and hearing her passion for justice, he decided it was time to come forward. Over coffee at a quiet diner, Marcus revealed details about Grayson's misconduct that sent chills down Maya's spine. He thought he was untouchable, Marcus said grimly. And maybe he was. Until now. Armed with new information, Maya started building her case. She documented every instance of Grayson's abuse, connecting dots that painted a damning picture. She also reached out to victims willing to share their stories publicly. Many were scared. Years of fear and mistrust didn't disappear overnight. But Maya reassured them. "This isn't just about me or you," she told them. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we've been through." As the pieces fell into place, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Grayson might have underestimated her, but she was ready to show him, and the world, that he had made the biggest mistake of his career. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was personal. The video of Grayson's outburst in the courtroom spread like wildfire. A young court clerk, horrified by what she had witnessed, secretly recorded the incident on her phone and uploaded it to social media. Within hours, the clip went viral, sparking outrage across the city and beyond. People watched in disbelief as Grayson lunged at Maya, his face twisted with anger, while she remained calm and composed even after being shoved. The hashtags #JusticeForMaya and #HoldGraysonAccountable began trending, drawing attention from news outlets, activists, and everyday citizens alike. Protests erupted almost immediately. Groups of people gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "No justice, no peace," and "End police brutality." Marches snaked through the streets, growing larger by the day. Voices rang out in unison, demanding accountability not just for Grayson, but for all officers who abused their power. Social media became a battleground of opinions, with some defending Grayson and others condemning his actions. But one thing was clear: the public wasn't going to forget this anytime soon. Grayson, however, seemed unfazed by the backlash. In fact, he appeared emboldened. During a hastily arranged press conference, he stood behind a podium, flanked by fellow officers and union representatives. His tone was dismissive, almost mocking. "This is nothing more than a lawyer trying to make a name for herself," he declared, pointing a finger toward the cameras. "She's playing the victim card because she can't handle being challenged in court." The comment only fueled the fire. Critics called him arrogant and out of touch, while supporters of Maya rallied around her even more fiercely. Clips of his remarks were shared online alongside testimonials from victims of his past misconduct. One woman tearfully recounted how Grayson had pulled her over without cause and berated her in front of her children. Another man described being tackled to the ground during a routine traffic stop, leaving him with injuries that still hadn't healed. These stories added depth to the narrative, turning what could have been a single scandal into a broader conversation about systemic injustice. Meanwhile, Maya stayed focused. She avoided giving interviews or engaging in public debates, knowing that staying disciplined was key. Instead, she worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring every piece of evidence against Grayson was rock solid. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Grayson's bluster, earning her respect from both allies and skeptics. Even those who initially doubted her motives found themselves impressed by her professionalism and determination. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. City officials faced calls for action, with petitions urging them to suspend Grayson pending an investigation. Local businesses displayed signs supporting Maya, and community leaders organized fundraisers to help cover legal costs. What started as an isolated courtroom incident had grown into a movement, a testament to the power of collective voices demanding change. But despite the mounting scrutiny, Grayson continued to believe he was untouchable. He laughed off the protests, shrugged off the criticism, and leaned on his connections within the police department. To him, this was just another storm that would eventually pass. What he failed to realize was that Maya wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever felt powerless against someone like him. And she wasn't about to back down. As the movement gained momentum, unexpected allies began stepping forward, each adding fuel to the growing fire against Officer Grayson. Among them was Marcus Hale, a retired detective who had once been Grayson's partner. Marcus had spent years watching Grayson's behavior escalate, from harsh interrogations to outright intimidation. But he had always stayed silent, fearing retaliation or damaging his own career. Now, seeing the courage Maya displayed and the support she inspired, Marcus decided it was time to speak up. One evening, Maya met Marcus at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. The dim lighting and distant hum of conversation provided a safe space for him to share what he knew. Sitting across from her, Marcus hesitated before finally speaking. "I've seen things," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "Things I should have reported years ago." He went on to describe instances where Grayson had crossed lines, fabricating evidence, planting drugs during searches, and targeting minority communities with alarming frequency. Marcus even revealed that some supervisors within the department had turned a blind eye, more concerned with protecting their reputation than upholding justice. Maya listened intently, taking notes while nodding occasionally to encourage him. When Marcus finished, she looked him in the eye and said, "You're doing the right thing. This isn't just about Grayson. It's about fixing a broken system." Her words reassured him, but they also reminded him of the risks involved. Still, Marcus agreed to testify if needed, knowing his testimony could make all the difference. Meanwhile, local activists played a crucial role in keeping the pressure on. Community organizer Lena Davis organized rallies outside the police station, drawing crowds that grew larger by the week. Speakers shared personal stories of injustice, creating an emotional connection with the audience. Volunteers handed out flyers and set up booths to educate people about their rights when interacting with law enforcement. Lena worked closely with Maya, ensuring the protests remained peaceful yet impactful. Together, they turned public outrage into action. Even inside the police department, cracks began to show. Some officers, uneasy about being associated with Grayson, started distancing themselves. One young patrol officer anonymously leaked internal emails showing how complaints against Grayson were routinely ignored or buried. Another submitted a statement corroborating Marcus's account, describing how Grayson often bragged about teaching lessons to those who challenged him. These revelations further eroded any remaining credibility Grayson might have had. The media amplified these efforts, shining a spotlight on both the systemic issues and individual acts of bravery. Journalists interviewed victims, activists, and whistleblowers, weaving together a narrative that painted Grayson not as an isolated bad actor, but as a symptom of a much larger problem. Documentaries and podcasts explored similar cases nationwide, highlighting patterns of misconduct and calling for reform. Through it all, Maya remained the steady force driving the movement. She coordinated meetings between activists, lawyers, and community members, fostering collaboration and unity. She encouraged victims to come forward, assuring them they wouldn't face this fight alone. And she kept reminding everyone that the goal wasn't revenge. It was accountability and change. Grayson, however, couldn't see the storm heading his way. Surrounded by dwindling supporters and clinging to his sense of invincibility, he dismissed the growing coalition as noise. But Maya knew better. With every new ally joining the cause, the walls around Grayson grew thinner. Soon, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. Maya's strategy shifted into high gear as she prepared to take the fight directly to Officer Grayson and the system that protected him. Behind closed doors, she worked tirelessly with her legal team, piecing together a case so airtight it would leave no room for excuses or cover-ups. This wasn't just about punishing Grayson. It was about dismantling the shield of immunity he had long relied on. The first step was filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against Grayson and the police department. The lawsuit didn't just focus on the courtroom assault. It highlighted years of alleged misconduct, painting a clear picture of systemic abuse. Maya included testimonies from victims, leaked documents showing ignored complaints, and even internal communications that exposed how higher-ups turned a blind eye to Grayson's behavior. Every detail was carefully documented, creating an undeniable narrative. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. As the lawsuit made headlines, Internal Affairs launched their own investigation into Grayson's conduct. For the first time in his career, Grayson found himself under intense scrutiny. Investigators combed through old cases, interviewing witnesses, and reviewing body cam footage. Some officers, fearing association with Grayson might tarnish their own reputations, quietly cooperated with the probe. Others tried to distance themselves entirely, refusing to comment or defend him publicly. Meanwhile, Maya continued gathering evidence, leaving no stone unturned. She reached out to experts in police accountability and civil rights law, seeking advice on strengthening her case. One professor suggested including data showing disproportionate rates of force used by Grayson against minority communities compared to his colleagues. Another recommended highlighting how similar cases nationwide had led to reforms. These insights added weight to her arguments, making it harder for anyone to dismiss the issue as trivial. But the pressure wasn't limited to legal proceedings. Public support for Maya's cause remained strong, thanks in large part to the efforts of activists like Lena Davis. Protests continued, with new slogans appearing on signs. Accountability now, and justice over power. Social media campaigns kept the story alive, ensuring it stayed in the public consciousness. Even celebrities and influencers joined the conversation, amplifying calls for action. Grayson, however, began showing cracks in his armor. Once confident and dismissive, he now appeared increasingly agitated during interviews. His explanations grew defensive, and his attempts to shift blame only made him look worse. When asked about specific accusations, he often resorted to vague denials or attacked those who spoke out against him. "They're lying," he snapped during one heated exchange with a reporter. "This is all a smear campaign." His words backfired spectacularly. Instead of rallying support, they alienated potential allies within the police department. Fellow officers whispered among themselves, questioning whether defending Grayson was worth the risk. Some stopped inviting him to social gatherings, while others avoided mentioning his name altogether. It was a stark contrast to the camaraderie he once enjoyed. By the time Internal Affairs announced they were recommending Grayson's suspension without pay pending further investigation, the tide had turned decisively against him. For the first time, Grayson looked vulnerable, his usual bravado replaced by thinly veiled panic. He lashed out at critics, blaming everyone from biased investigators to media manipulation. But his words fell flat, drowned out by the overwhelming chorus demanding justice. Maya watched these developments unfold with quiet satisfaction. She knew the battle wasn't over yet, but every setback for Grayson brought her closer to victory. With each passing day, the walls around him grew tighter, until there was almost no space left for him to maneuver. And Maya, she was ready to deliver the final blow. The turning point came during a packed city council meeting, where emotions ran high and the stakes couldn't have been clearer. Maya stood at the podium, her presence commanding yet calm. Behind her sat rows of supporters, victims of Grayson's misconduct, activists, and community members who had come to witness this moment. The room buzzed with anticipation as cameras rolled and reporters scribbled notes. This wasn't just another hearing, it was a reckoning. Maya began by recounting her own experience in the courtroom, the shove that sent her stumbling, the gasps from spectators, and the way Grayson dismissed her as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. But she didn't stop there. She wove her story into a larger narrative, sharing accounts from others who had suffered under Grayson's watch. There was Maria, a single mother who described being humiliated during a traffic stop while her children cried in the backseat. Then there was James, a college student arrested without cause and left with injuries that still lingered months later. Each story painted a vivid picture of abuse, fear, and injustice. "This isn't about me," Maya said firmly, her voice resonating through the chamber. "It's about them. And countless others who've been silenced, ignored, or pushed aside because they didn't have the power to fight back. It's about holding people accountable when they abuse the authority we give them." Her words struck a chord. Council members exchanged uneasy glances, aware of the weight of public opinion pressing down on them. Protesters outside chanted slogans loud enough to echo faintly inside the building, reminding everyone of the movement demanding change. Even some of Grayson's former colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing that defending him now would only make them complicit in his downfall. Grayson himself attended the meeting, sitting stiffly in the back row with his arms crossed. He scowled as Maya spoke, occasionally muttering under his breath to anyone nearby. But no one seemed interested in listening anymore. His arrogance felt hollow, his excuses worn thin. When he tried to interject during the cue and a portion, claiming Maya was exaggerating and playing politics, the crowd erupted in boos. City council members quickly moved to silence him, signaling how far his credibility had fallen. By the end of the meeting, it was clear something had shifted. Public pressure forced city officials to act. Within days, Grayson was suspended without pay pending further investigation, a move that sent shockwaves through the police department. Officers whispered nervously in hallways, wondering if similar scrutiny might fall on them next. Meanwhile, activists celebrated cautiously, knowing suspension was only the first step toward real accountability. For Maya, the victory was bittersweet. While she was proud of what she had accomplished so far, she understood the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Lawsuits take time, investigations can drag on, and systems designed to protect themselves don't crumble overnight. But she also knew this suspension marked a critical milestone, a sign that even someone like Grayson wasn't untouchable. As she walked out of the city council chambers that evening, surrounded by cheers and applause, Maya allowed herself a small smile. She glanced at Marcus Hale, who nodded approvingly, and Lena Davis, whose eyes glistened with tears of pride. Together, they had taken a stand, not just against one man, but against everything he represented. And though the fight wasn't over, Maya felt certain of one thing. Justice was finally within reach. Months of preparation culminated in a highly anticipated trial that gripped the city and the nation. Officer Daniel Grayson sat at the defendant's table, his face pale and his usual bravado replaced by a nervous twitch. For the first time, he was on the other side of the law, facing charges of assault and civil rights violations. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and victims who had waited years for this moment. Cameras flashed as Maya Jackson entered, her steps steady and deliberate. This wasn't just another day in court. It was history in the making. The prosecution's case was airtight, built on months of painstaking work. Witnesses took the stand one by one, recounting harrowing stories of encounters with Grayson. Maria described how he shouted insults at her during a routine traffic stop, reducing her to tears while her children watched in fear. James told the jury about the night Grayson tackled him to the ground without provocation, leaving him with a broken wrist. Even fellow officers testified, reluctantly admitting they had witnessed Grayson's aggressive behavior, but stayed silent out of fear or loyalty. Maya's cross-examinations were masterful. She asked pointed questions that left Grayson squirming in his seat, unable to provide satisfactory answers. When his attorney tried to discredit witnesses, claiming their memories were faulty or exaggerated, Maya countered with irrefutable evidence: body cam footage, internal emails, and documented complaints. Every attempt to deflect blame only dug Grayson deeper into a hole of his own making. The defense argued that Grayson was simply doing his job, enforcing the law in difficult situations. But the jury didn't buy it. They saw through the excuses, recognizing them for what they were: desperate attempts to justify abuse of power. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the verdict felt inevitable. When the judge read the decision, guilty on all counts, the room erupted in cheers and applause. Grayson slumped forward, his head buried in his hands as reality sank in. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, making him one of the few officers in the state to face such severe consequences for misconduct. The judge's words echoed through the courtroom. No one is above the law, not even those sworn to uphold it. But the victory didn't stop there. In the weeks following the trial, the police department announced sweeping reforms aimed at preventing future abuses. Mandatory bias training became standard for all officers, and an independent oversight board was established to review complaints against law enforcement. Victims finally felt heard, knowing their voices had sparked meaningful change. For Maya, the outcome was deeply personal. She stood outside the courthouse after the verdict, surrounded by supporters chanting her name. Reporters thrust microphones in her face, asking how it felt to take down someone like Grayson. Maya smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "This isn't my win," she said firmly. "It belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent. Justice may be slow, but it's worth fighting for." As the crowd cheered, Maya glanced at Marcus Hale, Lena Davis, and the countless others who had stood by her side. Together, they had proven that accountability was possible, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. And though the fight for equality and justice would continue, this victory reminded them all why they couldn't afford to give up. With Grayson behind bars and reforms underway, Maya Jackson became a symbol of resilience and hope. Her name was everywhere, on news headlines, in interviews, and even on billboards celebrating her role in holding power accountable. Yet, despite the newfound fame, Maya remained grounded. She continued practicing law, dedicating herself to cases involving police misconduct, racial injustice, and civil rights violations. To her, this fight wasn't about accolades. It was about creating a world where no one had to endure what she and so many others had faced. Maya's story resonated far beyond the courtroom. It inspired a new generation of activists, lawyers, and community leaders who saw her as proof that courage could spark real change. Young attorneys began reaching out to her for mentorship, eager to learn how to navigate the complexities of fighting systemic injustice. Maya welcomed them with open arms, sharing advice born from hard-earned experience. "The system isn't perfect," she often said during these conversations, "but we can make it better, one case at a time." Her impact extended into schools and neighborhoods, too. Teachers used her story to teach students about perseverance and standing up for what's right. Community centers hosted workshops on legal rights, empowering people to advocate for themselves when interacting with law enforcement. Even local artists joined the movement, painting murals of Maya alongside messages like "Justice prevails" and "Courage changes everything." These acts of creativity turned her journey into a rallying cry for unity and progress. But Maya never forgot the importance of humility. At rallies and events, she consistently redirected praise toward those who had supported her along the way. "I didn't do this alone," she reminded audiences whenever they applauded her accomplishments. This victory belongs to every victim who came forward, every whistleblower who risked their career, and every person who marched, donated, or prayed for justice. Her words carried weight because they were true. This had been a collective effort, not just the work of one individual. Still, Maya understood that the battle was far from over. While Grayson's conviction marked a significant milestone, it also exposed deeper issues within the system. Police departments across the country faced renewed calls for transparency and accountability. Some embraced reform, implementing policies to rebuild trust with marginalized communities. Others resisted, clinging to old ways of thinking. Maya knew the road ahead would be long, but she also believed momentum was on her side. One evening, as she addressed a crowd gathered outside City Hall, Maya reflected on how far they'd come and how much farther they still had to go. "We took down someone who thought he was untouchable," she said, her voice steady yet passionate. "But let's not stop there. Let's keep pushing until justice isn't just a dream. It's a reality for everyone. Until no child has to grow up afraid of those sworn to protect them. Until equality isn't an exception, but the rule." The crowd erupted in cheers, holding up signs and chanting slogans that echoed into the night. Among them were familiar faces: Marcus Hale, Lena Davis, and countless others who had stood shoulder to shoulder with Maya throughout the fight. They represented more than just allies. They embodied the spirit of collaboration and determination that had made this victory possible. As Maya stepped away from the podium, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for what they had achieved, but for the lessons learned along the way. Fighting for justice wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but every small step mattered. Every voice raised, every hand extended, every heart committed to change brought them closer to a brighter future. And as she walked home that night, the city lights glowing around her, Maya allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. The journey wasn't over, but one thing was certain. Together, they had proven that even the most entrenched systems could be challenged and changed.